Good afternoon, everybody. This is Ira Feuerstein, the Director of Channel Sales for Nextiva. I want to welcome you to our webinar this month, in the month of July. It's called The Death of the PSTN. This is going to be a tremendous webinar. There's a lot of good information here that as partners and potential partners, you guys have to know about, because the world that we know is changing as we move forward. And the public switch telephone network is going away. And I want to sort of do some intros here for you guys real quick. My name is Ira Feuerstein. I'm the Director of North American Channel Program at Nextiva. Also with us today, I have Jim Ferguson, who's a Vice President of Carrier Development from Broadsoft. Real quickly, folks, there's a Q&A area of your chat window. It's Q&A. During the presentation, if you guys have any questions or comments, you can put them in there, and then as we go through, we will get to as many as we can. We're also recording this presentation for future use. So if you have other people in your company who couldn't make it today, we'll definitely have this recorded for them to be able to watch it later. But real quickly on the agenda, first thing we're going to do is we're going to discuss how business communication is evolving. Definitely changing today, that the world we live in, so we're going to go through that. Then we're going to provide some detail on how the death of the PSTN is going to affect your customers. This is really crucial stuff, because as you're out there and you're coming up with solutions for customers, this is going to have a massive impact on businesses as we know them today. We're going to offer a refresher on hosted voice over IP, bring you guys back up to speed on that, and then discuss what this means for you and your customers. So let's go ahead and get into it. So Jim, I want to welcome you to the call today. If you can give us a quick overview of Broadsoft, that would be great.
Yeah, relative to Broadsoft, I mean, we are we're sort of the wizard behind the curtain. There's a lot of companies that will pretty much just white label what it is we offer, and then there are companies like Nextiva that are very front and center relative to the partnership. It's a very large global company. We have in excess of 30% of the market from a service provider perspective. If you took the top 25 service providers globally by revenue, we have our software installed with 20 of them. We represent in excess of 55% of the U.S. hosted VoIP marketplace measured by end users. And if you look at Nextiva as a telco, just to use that generic term, we have in excess of 500 telcos across the country where we are partners with. And we do a very good job of aligning with a number of developers and technology companies so that we have almost an open source type of an approach where we can continue to add services and drive applications and whatnot.
That's awesome.
If you look at the next slide, this is the sort of typical logo that a sales organization would use. I'm not going to run through all these, but I wanted the audience to visually see that there are a lot of large name accounts, and these are end users as well as mid-size and SMBs. And the great thing about hosted unified communications and hosted PBX is it's applicable to any size customer, from the largest stack down to small, 3, 4 site types of companies. And we're very well represented in the education, government, retail, finance, manufacturing verticals, to name a few.
Awesome, great intro. I'll tell you guys a little bit about Nextiva. We've been around since 2008. We currently have over 90,000 hosted communications customers worldwide. And the big thing for Nextiva, I want everyone to understand, is that we are all about creating a communications and collaboration platform, not necessarily just putting phones on desks. The world we live in today is much different than it was even 3 years ago. And businesses communicate and collaborate in a host of new ways that they never had anticipated before. They communicate mobilely. You know, they're on mobile phones, and they're tying in remote workers, and they have call center people who work in remote locations, and they really, you know, there's many companies out there who just give a phone solution, and really, you know, it's much more important, I think, to look at the whole picture, because what we're doing is we're going down the path of being, you know, of really customers really engaging and needing a solution, not necessarily just a phone on a desk. So that's the big thing that you're going to get with Nextiva, and our 90,000 customers really range the gamut from very small to very large, from names you've probably never heard of to names you have heard of. And from a channel perspective, you know, if you're a channel partner of ours already, thank you very much. We appreciate your business with us. If you're not, we'd love to talk to you about how we can partner together to bring communication and collaboration to your end customers. So, Jim, let's get into this. So tell me a little bit about how you see communication changing in the world, because, you know, we talk about this all the time internally.
Yeah, so that's a great question, Ira, and something that I think is very appropriate, very important for anybody who's working closely with customers and prospects to understand. So what I'm not going to do is just read verbatimly off the slides. I'm going to go into a little bit more detail and try to keep the visual tight while providing a little bit more backdrop relative to the information on each topic. So let's begin first with smart devices. I think we can all agree that they act as accelerators for hosted unified communications. Over the last few years, we've seen the world of smart devices be driven by profound changes in the way we interact with our friends, family, customers, and suppliers. And the combined use of these smart devices, fueled by the interactivity of all the various manufacturers and suppliers, is driving three major themes in the communications ecosystem. That first theme is devices are always on. They're cheaper, they're faster, they're more powerful, and have become mass market, which increases the need for interaction, connectivity, and increased bandwidth. The second theme we see is personalization. New applications are coming out of the woodwork. They're everywhere, which is driving up the demand for mobile data usage. And the bring your own device dynamic is here to stay and presents both security and procurement challenges as the boundaries of work and home are continuing to blur. And the third theme that we see tied to smart devices is social integration. As we all know, there's tremendous growth in social media, and the developments of a fully integrated social media experience will drive the next generation of fixed and mobile data usage. Ira, the bottom line is, as smart devices become increasingly accepted, companies are going to continue to move into adjacent markets to explore new revenue models such as mobile commerce and mobile payment systems. The next major trend we see is the impact of Generation Y, also known as millennials. Although there's no precise demographics on this generation, they're having a profound impact on business communications. Researchers typically peg this group by their birth years between the early 1980s and the early 2000s, which clearly eliminates me from the group. They're confident, risk takers, and have huge expectations from the workforce. And compared to all pre-generation groups, they have marked increase in the use and familiarity with communications, media, and digital technology. Now, anybody out there who has a kid or a friend, a college student, high school student, I'm sure you can relate to their profound proficiency working with an iPhone or a tablet. And all you have to do is ask them. Ira, the third trend that we see is the increasing mobile workforce. Business users want a single number that links to any device, to any location, with integration of fixed and mobile endpoints. Residential users are dropping landlines by the droves. In fact, 1/4 of all residential users do not have a landline screwed to their wall at home anymore. And another major trend is the proliferation of faster broadband. Now, the obvious impact here is on increased productivity, but there are other impacts such as economic job growth and improved quality of life as the distribution of ideas and information fostering competition for the development of new products, processes, and business models. And the last one I want to talk about is the notion of hosted unified communications. As we all know, analysts have been talking about cloud computing and UC for years. Well, things are really taking off now. By 2015, the Gartner Group expects all Forbes Global 2000 companies to use public cloud services, effectively transforming much of the current IT hardware, software, and database markets. Cloud computing and UC will transform business and business models as we know them today. Now, that's a lot of information that I gave, Ira, but I think the key thing here is that from a professional salesperson's perspective at this day and age, you need to understand these dynamics when you're positioning hosted UC services. You can't, as you talked about earlier, which I really love, it's just not a phone on a desk. There's a lot more to this, and you got to be informed and knowledgeable so you position yourself as an advisor with your customers.
Yeah, absolutely. And you know, from a Nextiva perspective, we're seeing this more and more. And as a matter of fact, I'm a great example of that, right? I travel all over the country. I can't be locked down to my desk. I've got to be able to be on any device at any time of my choosing and have the same experience. So whether I'm sitting at my office and, you know, using a Polycom phone, or right now I happen to be in a partner's office in New York, I'm using actually my Microsoft Surface Pro 2 tablet, or maybe I want to use my Android phone because I'm not an iPhone guy. You know, I have apps on these things that run all the time that allow me to do voice calls, video calls, instant messaging, presence, and you know, no matter where I choose to be or what device I happen to choose to be on, I get the same experience, and I'm still tied in to my company. And we're seeing tons and tons of customers needing and wanting this technology, and there's not very many companies out there doing it, frankly. So we spend a lot of time on these 5 areas developing new products and services that enhance the communication and collaboration experience. So it was really good to go through those things. But you know, the reason we're really here is to talk about the death of the PSTN. Now, it's funny, I heard this a couple of years ago that the PSTN was dying, and, you know, frankly, I didn't believe it. And then it came back, and then all of a sudden it's like real. So, I mean, so tell us about this.
Yeah, that's a great lead-in. And I'll tell you, if you haven't already, I would encourage everyone just to Google death of the PSTN. There is a tremendous amount of literature, facts, trends, conditions, movement, traction that's all taken place, and I'm going to hit some of the highlights, and I think they're important and relevant. If you go back to around 2008, there were a lot of articles and studies that were being published that offered significant research that pointed to the decline in the relevancy of the PSTN in a world that increasingly communicates over IP-based networks. In fact, those articles actually talked about the fact that the PSTN was diagnosed with a terminal condition that could take 5, 10, maybe 15 years or sooner before it would actually die off. In December in 2009, the technical arm of the FCC, known as the TCC, they published a public notice article where they were asking service providers to make comments on transitioning from a circuit switch network, aka the PSTN, to an all IP network infrastructure. And I think one of the more compelling responses was from the big gorilla AT&T, and I quote the article, "It's time to cut the cord. AT&T told the FCC that the death of landlines is a matter of when, not if." AT&T then went on to ask the FCC to set a specific deadline to pull the plug on the PSTN. So here you had the big AT&T working with the FCC, basically asking them to make decisions that would impact the huge based infrastructure that they had, knowing the world was going to an all IP infrastructure and dying away the PSTN. In July of 2011, that technical arm of the FCC produced a strong recommendation basically saying we will now begin to start imposing specific dates for the sunset of the PSTN. And then there's a number of articles from January through June of 2013 where AT&T actually petitioned the FCC to allow AT&T to get out of a lot of their PSTN equipment and all the associated FCC rules and regulations that govern those networks. One of the big reasons there was that AT&T stated that it's impossible to find resources and talent that understands how to work on the old infrastructure of a PSTN, and that everybody now that comes out of school, all the skill-based people are all IP-centric, and that's where all the technology drivers are going as well. So just some backdrops around some important dates that I think are relevant for the time that's running out on the PSTN, Ira.
Awesome. And, you know, the next graphic is really interesting to me. It sort of shows, you know, when the PSTN was invented and kind of where that started, and then where we're at today in the switch off. Can you go through this for us a little bit?
Yeah, I actually love this slide. You know, I used to well, for 25 years, I ran large sales organizations with a number of the service providers. I would bet somebody on this call actually had worked in my organization at some point in time if they're based on the West Coast. I know a lot of people, and I've actually sent this slide out to them. They use it when they're working with customers, and it's just a real good basic like animal chart that we call them, right? Big pictures, and then allows the rep to talk through this in a number of different ways. And it's pretty powerful if you think about this for a minute. So you go back to 1875, and Alexander Graham Bell basically was credited with inventing the first practical telephone. And that development or invention actually led to the creation of American Bell, which through years and iterations became obviously, you know, Bell Telephone, AT&T, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Then you fast forward from 1875 to 1933, where Bell Labs begins to now start delivering voice quality demonstrations. And without getting too technical, they're using what's called Hertz, it's initialed HZ, somewhere between 300 and 3,300 Hertz. Now, what's interesting is that on the PSTN today, the voice quality that you get on a landline is the same voice quality that Bell Labs invented back in 1933. 300 to 3,300 Hertz. And what's interesting, though, is that the human voice today can make sounds of frequencies that are 20 times greater than what is being used on the PSTN through that equipment. And this is why, Ira, companies like Polycom works so closely with Broadsoft to develop their high-definition phones, because the human voice is able to hear at a much higher quality than what's done on the old PSTN through regular phones. And I would encourage anybody who hasn't used a high-definition phone to make a call, stand on the opposite side of the room. You'll be amazed at the voice quality. And again, so with this little chart in front of a customer, you know, the very simplistic message that I would encourage everyone to carry forward is, do not allow your customer to buy legacy services that would be used on the PSTN, because the train is running into a wall And as a trusted advisor, you need to make sure they're educated and informed, and do not allow them, to the best of your ability, to be making those kind of decisions. Take them into IP, cloud, hosted, unified communications.
Yeah, it's huge. And, you know, the thing that stands out to me here is 4 years left until they switch it off. Like, to me, it reminds me of the gold rush in California, where everyone started swarming there to try to collect as much gold as they want. This is it. I mean, there's no turning this back at this point, right?
Well, that's our position, and I mean, you know, you're still going to find some customers that are so well entrenched with legacy equipment that sometimes it's hard not to continue that way. But when you're talking with companies that are, you know, out trying to make, you know, new decisions, mission critical applications, you've got to make sure they're educated and informed and aware of these things that are developing.
Absolutely, absolutely. So at the end of the day, I mean, what would you say this means to our partners and how they do things?
Yeah, so, you know, from my perspective, and again, everybody on this call, very intelligent, very experienced, very successful in their own right. Some of this is secondhand, some of this is fundamental, you know, but to me, this type of time frame that we're in, this type of movement and direction relative to the PSTN going away, sort of tees up the ability for a rep to provide insight with their customer, to bring more value, to not just be part of the fulfillment phase of taking an order, but to educate and to help customers see that there are new ways of doing things, and there are a lot of regulation now that is actually driving the need to be all over this type of movement. We also see that reps who are successful in selling hosted services have an opportunity to really drive quota retirement, or if they don't have quota, like 99% of the people on this call, to really be able to set themselves up for accelerated payments, extra money, sticky solutions, right? That's always a thing when you're residual based. You want to make sure your customer has solutions that are going to withstand the test of time, and that's where these hosted solutions really come into play. And from a targeting perspective, right, when you're out looking at developing your campaigns and who you're going to go after those embedded bases of PSTN customers, because I think they're ripe for this kind of a conversation, Ira.
Yeah, and I definitely think it's like as our partners and our future partners are looking towards the next 4 years, it's going to become really super critical that they are coming to customers with a solution sell. There's a lot of people out there not used to selling a solution, but you know, as the technology gets more and more complex, it's important to sell a solution, and it goes back to the whole stickiness issue. The more touch points you have with a customer, the longer you're going to have that customer stick around, and the longer you're going to make residual income on that. So really super important as we look at these next 4 years. You know, Jim, I know you actually interact with a bunch of different service providers. You know, talk to me a little bit about the current impact of, and how these changes are going to affect customers. I mean, we've talked about the partner side of things, but what about customers?
Yeah. So, and this is again, I think, a really important notion here. And again, I'm not going to read off the slide. People can see that. I think these are all key elements, but I want to touch on a couple of sort of supporting bits of information. I mentioned earlier, you know, more and more of the research that's out there from a sales training perspective tells us that the buying process has changed dramatically over the past few years. And I'm sure everybody can attest to, you know, it used to be salespeople were the ones who would talk to customers about, you know, product enhancements and technology changes and all that, and that's not necessarily the case anymore. Customers come to the table much more informed. They bring salespeople into the process at a much further along in the sales process. They're using them more and more as a fulfillment resource. Tell me what this costs, how quickly can I get it, et cetera. Where great salespeople have to change the game. They got to become disruptive. They got to challenge their customers. by thinking about bringing more insight to the sales process. So there's a number of positive impacts that I think hosted UC has to customers. I mean, some of the obvious: you minimize technology risks, you simplify phone system design, maintenance, and administration, you solve the big issue on every C-level person's desk, which is business continuity and disaster recovery. Scalability is awesome with these types of products, and you are able to provide advanced feature sets to very small end customers that typically was only available in much larger deployments. I think there's better value, there's reduction of CapEx. You set up an environment where it's more a pay-as-you-go, kind of a use, grow model, if you will. But I'll tell you, Ira, to me, the biggest impact that hosted UC has on a customer is the potential to drive improved employee productivity. And I want to quote a couple of studies, and then I want to share a real quick true story where when I was out with a large customer, large service provider actually last month. So there was a recent study by Forrester that basically found that 50% of workers experience project delays because key decision makers can't be reached when you need them the most. And that's why these services that have SIM ring, simultaneous ring, voicemail to email, presence, and IM are well positioned to address that particular dynamic that Forrester brought out. Another research company called Sage, they did a study that found that 22% of deadlines are missed because the right person can't be found at the right time. And lastly, perhaps one of the more reputable research companies, the Gartner Group, they did a study that claims by early 2015, workers are going to spend more than 80% of their time working collaboratively, and that collaboration will drive up 50% of the next decade's productivity improvement. So when you're selling these types of companies a solution, if you're able to hit on some of those issues, I think you're going to be in a much better situation. So my example, we were out at a meeting with a large service provider and had the SVP of sales in the meeting, and he was talking about a number of things, and then there were two different VPs that were in the room as well. Excuse me. And they were talking about how they try to leverage their large worldwide network to sell UC. And they do have a phenomenal network, and it is an important part of being able to position the service. But it's not all that important. And these two VPs were going back and forth, debating whether it was the network or it was, you know, flexibility features or no CapEx of UC, whatever. And I sort of stood up and in my typical Ferguson way, I sort of abrupted the meeting and I said, look, I can tell you right now, when I meet with C-level people, nobody cares about an MPLS network. Nobody cares about, this, that, and the other. What every single C-level person wants to understand today is how can I drive more productivity throughout my entire organization, because we all are tasked with having to do more with less. The minute I said that, in the room walked one of the product managers who just got off a conference call with about 25 of his distribution partners, if you will, and all they talked about was driving increased productivity. So I think if you hone in on that productivity item and find out what the pain points are of a customer, and then be able to leverage and position the hosted UC that Nextiva provides as a driver for improving productivity, you're going to go far in this space.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I mean, we spend a lot of time with our partners helping dive into what customers' true needs are and how we can take different parts of the unified communications puzzle and put it together in a solution for a customer that's literally going to impact their business. Now, impact could mean a lot of things, right? It could mean they're going to save money. It could mean they're going to be more efficient. It could mean they're going to give better customer service to their customers. It could be, tying in remote workers more efficiently. Unified communications does a lot of things, but that's why I think it's so important for our partners to understand that when you sit down across the desk from a customer, you need to take the time to understand what it is that will impact their business and then create a solution around that, because I guarantee you there's a lot of people out there who are not doing it, and you will set the bar way higher with your customers if you're able to do that successfully. A big thing, with Nextiva is this whole unified communications thing. We've actually rolled out our Nextiva app, which is a mobility app, and, it does a lot of really cool things. Like I sort of described this at the beginning. This is the app that I use on every one of my devices. So it may be my laptop at my office. I've got it on my Surface Pro 2 tablet. I've got it on my Android phone. I've got it on my Galaxy Tab. Yes, guys, I'm way too connected. My wife hates it. But the cool thing is I can be on any device at any time. And this Nextiva app really does some killer cool stuff. Like, as you can see on the screen, you can see presence. So I can be sitting on an airplane at 35,000 feet and know if people are on the phone in my organization. I can know if they're away from their desk. I can know if they're not logged into the system. I can send them an instant message from this app. Heck, if I needed to talk to my whole sales team quickly, what I could do, I have a little icon called My Room, and I can literally drag 5 people into my room, and within seconds, they will all get notification on their device, whatever device they chose to be on, that, hey, Ira would like you in his room right now. Pull them in. We can do an instant chat between everybody, and then I can take it a step further. If I feel like chat's not doing it, I can click on the phone icon and bring them all into my audio conference bridge. This is the future of unified communications, guys. This is where it's going. Any device, anytime, PC, Mac, Android, iOS, virtual meeting rooms, drag and drop people into meeting rooms, instant messaging, presence, directories. This can integrate with your, LDAP and your NextOS, which is our platform directory. It's a killer, cool application. And if you're not using it today as a partner, you absolutely need to be using this, because it's a game changer. It has changed the way I communicate and collaborate. Jim, let's talk about some conversation points that can lead into the sales process. I know you have a lot of history there.
Sure. So again, some of these are relatively fundamental. I know everybody is really good about knowing how to position this. I mean, I'll piggyback off of what Ira said about the Unified Communications app. If I'm a rep and if I'm a professional salesperson and I'm working with customers and clients on a new phone system, and they are looking at a hosted Nextiva system, if you will, I think before I go too far into talking about the actual phone and all that sort of thing, I'm talking about this Unified Communications app, because what I've done, right, I've asked all those great questions. I understand employee productivity is probably one of the biggest drivers that customers have. I've done the research. I've listened to this webinar. I know that there are a lot of reputable research firms that are talking about how decisions get delayed because they can't find people, how collaboration is so key. And when you understand how to use this app, it just gets everybody's attention. And I think it makes positioning and selling a big, large, multiple 100-site phone system much easier. And so that's one thing that Ira, I mean, you hit the nail on the head. The other thing, obviously, is when companies are talking about trying to compare a hosted system cloud services versus, you know, adding more iron or PBX and all that. It's that obvious thing that we're talking about today, you know, the sunset of the PSTN, and what does that mean? And do they, you know, that's like buying a horse and buggy still, you know. I mean, it's just going away. AT&T's on record all over, you know, the internet about being behind this thing, pushing it. There's no talent out there. Nobody's fixing these things. It just doesn't make any sense to be talking about, thinking about buying something that's going away. You know, and those would be the kind of things that I think are really important. And I don't know, Ira, if you've seen, you know, in some of your dealings, maybe some other counterpoints or points that kind of support this thing as well. But I think the real thing is what's driving the sunset of the PSTN. You know, it's not just hearsay. FCC's behind it. The big companies are behind it. Talk about that, and then understand how to position the UC app and how it complements a hosted phone system and drives and addresses all of the major items that are on a CIO's desk relative to productivity, mobility, and so on is probably the way to go.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. And, you know, from a unified communications and collaboration perspective, you know, guys, we're working on tons of stuff that are, I mean, 2 things that are coming out in the next week or 2. You know, we're rolling out our Nextiva Drive app, which is, think of sync your documents automatically from your any mobile device, and as well as Dropbox-like usage. We're also rolling out our Nextiva Meetings product, which is going to replace what we're using today, which is WebEx, and that's going to be a fraction of the price. But it's all about, as a salesperson out in the field, you need to be out there understanding your customers' businesses and where we can make an impact, and it's not always just the phone. So, you know, at the end of the day, Jim, you know, how do you think our partners are going to benefit from the trend here?
Yeah, so, you know, this slide is, I mean, it's designed obviously for partners and for direct people. I mean, you know, one of the things we just see is that people obviously who are, I mean, there's still going to be an opportunity out there for, you know, feeds and speeds, as we call them, right? I mean, you're going to tell somebody an Ethernet pipe here, you're going to be able to do a point-to-point circuit there, you're going to be able to do some COLA, whatever the case might be. But the partners that we see that are making the big dollars, that are doing the big deals, are able to understand how to position UC services with customers. And a lot of times what will happen is, by positioning yourself as that trusted advisor, you're gonna be able to pull through a lot of other services that go beyond just the UC thing. But by leveraging UC, we just see a lot of the top producing people are typically selling and representing that stuff a lot. You know, I will tell you, I don't know your compensation system, you know, because there's too many clients that I deal with. But we oftentimes see a lot of accelerators and bonuses that are put into effect for being able to sell this stuff. We talked about the stickiness with customers, and that's a big thing for partners, obviously. I mean, you know, none of this stuff becomes obsolete. Any major software updates that we do as a global leader gets pushed down to our service providers, that gets pushed out to the end user. It's not like you got to do another rev and you got to do another, you know, enhancement to the PBX or whatever the case might be. And again, it's a little different way, right, of being able to approach a customer, educating them, providing some insight, and helping them to feel like doing business with you is the right thing to do.
Yeah, and my recommendation to everybody is, if you're not doing this stuff, you need to start like now, because you're going to start losing deals to people who are doing these things. They're going to come in, they're going to sit down with the same customer you're sitting down with, and they're going to dive in and come up with something that maybe you didn't think of, or you just wanted to try to sell a phone system, and the customer is going to be looking at both saying, wow, the guy number 2 or person number 2 is really giving me a solution that's going to change our business, and you're going to see yourself losing deals to people who become more and more adept at this stuff. So make sure, you know, that you're all over it. And then as far as next steps, Jim, like, what do you think everyone should be doing here?
Well, you know, you could just read this slide, and I think that from a simplistic standpoint, that's just some of the things. I mean, I personally, you know, I wouldn't be selling any type of TDM-based services. I would be all over this hosted stuff, these cloud services. I would be talking it all the time. I'd become an expert at it. I'd find the verticals that I get the most traction from, because, you know, the way manufacturing companies make decisions and have applications, and the business issues that they're dealing with are the same from one manufacturer to the other. So, you know, I'd drill into to the specific vertical. I'd work with the cloud stuff. I'd continue to do my own research, like I know all of you do, to become educated. You know, you are the best investment that you can make is investing in yourself, and I would provide all of that additional insight when I'm working with customers. And you know, I would just go full bore. I'd learn this app that Ira talked about. I'm sure that, you know, he's willing to do all kinds of demonstrations for people, and there's all kinds of different things that we can do to help out, and I'd just be all over it, and I think you'll see nothing but great momentum as a result.
I agree. And, you know, from Nextiva's perspective, everyone, what I would say to you is engage us. We are living and breathing this every minute of every day, and this is what we do. This is how we grew up as a company. We didn't reinvent ourselves from something else. We've started in the space. You know, in 2008, we're still in the space, and we're a company that's really going out there and developing new and innovative products and services to make communication and collaboration better. So we have lots of resources on staff to help you. You know, we've got your dedicated channel manager, we've got sales engineers, we've got myself, you know, we've got support folks. So anyone that you need to engage, we are happy to engage and help you guys go through this process and bring customers up to speed on kind of where the world of telecommunications is today. So I highly recommend that you engage us and let us help you, because our close rate is phenomenal when we get engaged. And besides the point, you'll be learning from some very, very good people who've been doing this a long time. So please make sure you engage. So I think right now what I'd like to do is open it up. I know we've had some questions come in. And Mary, do you have some questions for us?
I do, Ira and Jim. Thanks so much for that really informative content. And I think our entire audience is going to be really able to use this information very effectively for their businesses. A couple questions to kick off the Q&A session. And please, folks, if you have additional questions, continue to submit them. We've got just a few more minutes for some additional questions. But to get the conversation started, the first question out of the gate is, so would traditional PRI just go away? Whichever one of you wants to take that.
I'll let Jim take that.
Well, I'll start. I mean, you know, there's obviously a ton of PRI installations out there, you know, but PRI, you know, ties right into this whole TDM technology. It ties right into the whole PSTN, and you know, I would venture to say it's just a matter of a year, two, maybe three before you're going to see nobody really selling PRIs. It just doesn't make any sense in terms of these the direction and the way the technology is going. It's dying.
And you know, one thing I would say on that too, guys, is that let's say you've got a customer who just went out and bought XYZ PBX, and it's got a PRI handoff on it. You know, there's no way they're going to scrap that thing, right, because they just made a big investment in it. What I would do is sell our SIP trunking product. So we're bringing them to the cloud. We take that SIP trunking, we register it through an edge device. It could be an AdTran device, something that can convert it over to something that PBX can read, like PRI. And now you've actually taken them out of the TDM world, at least temporarily. You got them coming into the cloud for SIP trunking, and you've started in that, what I call the crawl, walk, run approach, right? That's your first step. That's your first transition. And you don't have to go in and tell your customer, hey, by the way, that $50,000 Avaya you just bought is a boat anchor, right? That wouldn't go over very well.
Absolutely. And so the next question, I think that kind of falls along nicely with that path is, you know, so what does this do to our pricing model if we're used to, you know, revenue streams and pricing models for our customers that are built on the premises-based model?
Yeah, so there's different ways we can handle that depending on the partner. But so from a customer perspective, we're one of the only hosted companies out there that actually does a lines and extensions model on hosted PBX. One of the bugaboos of hosted over the years has been, you know, when you start getting into 50, 100, 500, 1,000 seats, you know, when these companies are charging, let's say, 25 or 30 bucks a seat, it doesn't scale economically anymore. So Nextiva has come up with a way to actually scale it economically. And we do something called lines and extensions. They still get our hosted solution, but we mimic what their sort of traditional PBX would do. So, you know, real inexpensive per seat costs, which gives each phone on the desk access to our feature set, voicemail, caller ID, call waiting, three-way calling, auto attendant, hunt group, all that stuff. And then we layer upon it however many call paths that they want to use. And the cool thing is you can build some massive efficiencies on this model, especially if you have dispersed workforce with people all over the place, because let's say you have an office of 5 people somewhere. You know, normally they're going to pay for 3 phone lines, you know, at that location just to make sure. You have to plan for the worst case scenario where let's say you have 100 locations of 5 phones apiece and they happen to all be in different areas of the country. You know, we can get away with probably a 20% line to extension ratio knowing all those locations across the country are sharing a pool of call paths. So from a customer perspective, it scales very well. From a partner perspective, it's sort of a one-off conversation we should have with each one of you. If you have that specific question, I would call, you know, get a hold of myself, or if you're a partner, your channel manager, and we can talk about those things. There are some innovative approaches that we can do to make that transition a little bit better for you guys.
Thanks, Ira. That sounds great. The next question comes specifically addressed to a type of PBX, and that is sometimes the AdTran requires additional adjustments to work properly with the PBX, as I'm sure we're familiar with. And the partner is asking to what extent our support team is able to help with that integration and implementation of an AdTran SIP solution. Yeah,
so what we do is we are certified and we are certifying on a variety of PBXs that are commonplace. So any of those that have a PRI handoff, we actually lab it out in our lab with the AdTran folks to make sure that on the AdTran side of things, everything's good. So we have the resources internally to help with that if you don't.
Perfect, perfect. And then just a couple of questions to wrap up here. We are running out of time. The next one would be, do you have some examples of information that we can share with our customers to help educate? You mentioned Stop, Educate, Sell. What are some tools and resources that you recommend as educational materials?
Yeah, absolutely. So if you guys are partners already, you have access to our partner portal. There's a marketing area in there with some training and materials. We're also designing a full certification program right now, which I'm hoping to have live in the next, let's say, 30 days. So we'll have this whole certification program where as partners, you guys will be able to go through and certify on cloud communications, which will be huge. And then you can, you know, when you get in front of your customer, you will actually be able to sit in front of them and say, yes, I'm certified in cloud communications, and I know what I'm talking about.
Excellent, excellent. And so that does just bring us to the time end here for the webinar today, but I would ask each of you, Ira and Jim, closing thoughts, final words that you'd like to share with our audience today. If there was one thing that they could take away from the death of the PSTN, what would you want them to know?
Jim, I'll let you take it first.
You want me to go first, Ira?
Yeah, go ahead.
Sure. So, you know, I just think that when you're involved, we're at a real inflection point now where, I mean, we've been talking about IP for a long time. But now what's happening is that everybody's behind the push to move to IP, to move to cloud, to move to hosted services. You know, there's no more resistance from the big telcos, the big ILECs. They want it done. They know it's more efficient. They know their customers want it. And so I think there's a window of opportunity right now that is almost like a land grab. And one of the things we didn't really talk about on this particular presentation, but again, it's all out there when you look at the studies that talk about the growth of cloud services and hosted PBX. I mean, it is such a massive hockey stick, and, you know, we're about a third of the way up. I mean, it's explosive growth. People want to understand this. They want to buy this stuff. It is here and now, and I would jump on this with a vengeance.
Absolutely. I would echo that, no doubt. I mean, this is it, guys. This is happening. There's no stopping it. Either it's going to be embraced, or I want you to think back to 10 years ago. Every company pretty much had a person working in their office who was the telecom guy. He was that one who went around and did punch downs of wires. He's the guy who, you know, when things were wrong with phones, he moved them around and had to move people physically. That guy, he didn't embrace things generally. And guess where they're at today? They're not in jobs anymore. They're just not. That's the truth of the matter. So in this world, I foresee the similar thing. It's going to be for those people who embrace this change in communications. They're going to have a very healthy business for a very long time and make lots of money. For those who don't embrace it, you'll probably be doing something else here in the next 5 years. So that's, you know, and that's the reality of it. You know, it is what it is. So, you know, if you guys want to learn more about how you can make this happen, please feel free to reach out to me. I've got a very easy email address. It's ira@nextiva.com, nextiva.com. I'm not that cool. It's just my last name's too long, and I didn't like the long email address, but it's real simple. You can reach out, or if you're currently a partner, obviously you have your channel manager contact. Reach out to them. But we're willing to engage you in any way, shape, or form to help through this transition and help you make all the income that you want to make over the next 5, 10, 20 years. And it's here. Let's do it. And that's what I'll leave you guys with. So we're gonna be doing another webinar next month. We're still finalizing the topic, so be looking for an email from us here in the next week or so. But I promise you it'll be every bit as good as this webinar. And we thank you for your time today, and hope you have a great week. And when you hang up on this call, I'd be jumping all over this stuff if I were you. So have a good day, and we'll talk soon.